So I'd like to thank everybody to the Hood Independent Podcast. It's been a while since we've been on, approximately 3 weeks or so. And today we're on the first E, which is economics. And I have intentionally withheld holding the podcast because I just wanted to see some more of the indicators and signs in our economy to get a feel on which direction we were moving in. And so, as we left off at the last time, there's a few misspoken quotes. One that I want to clear up. And we were talking about the Strategic Oil Reserve, which is ran by the federal government. It is an emergency oil reserve for the nation in times of emergencies or tragedies, or in the sake of war, that we will have enough oil to get us through any crisis situation that we may find ourselves in. And so I was saying that at that time that there were 75 million barrels of oil in the Strategic Oil Reserve that was released um, to lower the gas prices. It's an artificial way of decreasing the oil price because, as we stated before, um, in our economy, we have the best economy in the world, and it is built on the laws of supply and demand. So where there's a lesser amount of supply, which it has been for the past couple of years, the price goes up. Whenever there's less of something, the price goes up because it becomes more valuable. And the opposite is also true, that when there's an abundance of a given commodity, in this case we're talking oil, then it lowers the price. And so that is, the price has came down some, probably since our last discussion on economics. But again, it's been artificially reduced because of the strategic oil being released. And so, as I was saying, 750 barrels was not correct. It's 750 barrels, not gallons, but barrels of oil that are in the strategic oil reserve at its maximum capacity. And so, this administration, the Biden administration, has strategically been lowering that reserve, because we keep in mind it's for emergency use, not for everyday use, not to lower gas prices, but in the case of an emergency or a tragedy or a catastrophe. So 750 million barrels of oil is a lot of oil, especially when it's converted to gas, because you've got 52 gallons in one single barrel of oil. So you can do the math on that. 750 million barrels times 42 gallons. And like I said, that turns out to be billions upon billions of uh, gallons of oil that can be converted to gas, which would take us through almost any situation that would come up on us unaware, I shouldn't say unplanned for, because that's what it's for, is to be planned for. So that oil has been constantly over the last 2 years being used as a way to artificially lower the gas prices, because even no matter how the gas oil gets into the economy, it still has an effect on prices. So as we release those oil from the reserves, it superficially reduces the price. And so it's been happening, and we're on the verge now. It is February 19th, 2023. We're still on the verge again of releasing an additional 26 million barrels again from the reserves. Now, the thing that concerns me about that, if we do run into an emergency, then we're going to be depleted because we have been using it in the wrong way up until this time. So I wanted to address that we have 750 million barrels, not 75 million, which is a lot of gas, a lot of gallons of gasoline. And so, uh, quick review. The economy is built on supply and demand. Someone has something uh, that someone else wants. They attach a price to it. They float it out there to see what the market will tolerate, what the market will bear. For example, you could use a house or a automobile that may be for sale. They put one price out there and inflate the price, and the house or the automobile tends to sit there because no one is willing to pay that exorbitant price for it. So they have to find the price margin. They have to find a margin that's acceptable both to the buyer and the seller. So as the seller, reduces the price on the house or on the automobile, then you start getting interested buyers, and then the negotiation starts. So, but you have to find a price margin. If it's too high, it's just going to set, which decreases the um, the price of the demand for the good. And so when we find that price margin, then you get individuals calling, making offers for the house or for the automobile, and then the negotiation starts from there. Um, $500,000, we say, for a house it may be out of a lot of people's price range, but it does fit other people's price range. But when it comes into the average person's price range, then, like I said, the negotiation and the debate starts. And so it triggers the law of supply and demand, which our economy is built on, which our country is built on. Those market forces have always been in place since the beginning of this country. The market forces are supply and demand, and we have the greatest economy in the world. At least we have in times past, and that's being challenged all the more as time passes because of the way that the economy um, is being manipulated or tampered with. So, as I spoke last time, we were talking about a coming recession as the result of inflation. Inflation is simply when there's too much of money that's put into the general economy as a whole, and it makes anything that you're buying less valuable. You got more money chasing fewer and fewer goods, which also causes inflation. And our government, one thing I did not mention previously that I'll mention today, the only way an inflation takes place is when the government interferes with the private market. And it's called a private market for a reason, meaning it should not have government influence or government invasion or interruption into the economy. The law of supply and demand will figure out the price margin on any item, any good, once it gets to a price that the buyer is willing to pay and the seller likewise agree that that's the price, even though they always desire a higher um, profit margin. But once they find that equilibrium for the item, then our economy works fine. So it's the economy and the law of supply and demand that sets the price, and it does not need government interference. And so, anytime that a inflation situation comes about, it's because of government interference. Now, back in 2020, when all the stimulus money was going out, they were paying people 1,400 at one time. Then it went to 2,000. They gave a check for 1,400, and then additional 600, $2,000 stimulus checks. They also were paying people to stay at home and not go to work, which also contributed to the disruption in the economy. Now, keep in mind, the government is the one that's doing this. They were also paying people unemployment uh, that did not want to go back to work, using COVID as an excuse that people were fearful to go back to work because of COVID. And you may have had that with some people, but in totality, that was not the case. All the stuff was being done intentionally. So you flooded the market with billions and billions of dollars. And as we said, before, as an economic principle, when you place too much money into the market at one time, it lessens what the money is worth. So now the money buys less because it's too much cash in the economy. And so that was one of the things that triggered inflation. Before any recession becomes inflation first, and then it grows from there. And then there's other factors that also came into to play in this situation, and one of those was the supply chain crisis that we also have. And all this stuff has happened, and everything. There's so much going on in our society that some people have short memories and can't remember the things just happened 2 years or 3 years ago. Some people may not even remember what happened 1 year ago. But back in 2021 is when we had a supply chain backup at our ports. One in Los Angeles, California. The other one, I do believe, was in the Baltimore area. And possibly, those are two I'm sure of, but there may be even a third one in the Georgia, South Carolina areas. So those are all the ports of entry that goods from other countries comes into America, to the United States, and they're inspected by the U.S. Customs Department. U.S. Customs, again, is part of the federal government. So they inspect all, supposedly, the containers that come in and see what the cargo is on those containers. And in the state of California, for certain, they had passed a law that any semi truck drivers that own a rig or a semi could not enter into the state of California or access its shipping ports if the vehicle was 2010 or older. So it's forcing people to get new vehicles in order to come in, and that also attributed to the supply chain backup or crisis, where all those barges uh, with the containers set out on the Pacific Ocean for months and months. And to this point, I still believe that some of those containers are still waiting to be offloaded approximately a year and a half later, if you can believe that. That was 2021. We're now in 2023. And you can see that when you go into the stores, where at times where shelves used to be full, or food and items were plentiful, not so much anymore. Now they're getting basically online shipping or shippings that's coming in behind schedule, which is causing a shortage in the stores. So once again, whenever there is a shortage of something, it makes the item, be it food or any other commodity, it causes the price to rise. And that's what we've been dealing with, which is the second factor contributing to inflation. So one is all the unnecessary money going into the economy, making the money less valuable. Two, you got a shortage of goods in the store, which makes the goods worth more money, or the goods become more valuable while the money becomes less valuable. It's almost like a perfect storm. That is the definition of inflation. And so you got both of those things taking place. Then you look at uh, different things that the government is attempting to do. They want to pay off student loan debt. They want to provide free health care. They want to provide free housing. They want to provide uh, uh, free housing, as I stated, education, health care, paying off student loan debts to the tune of $1 trillion is what they're looking at in student loan debt. And so all those things is money being thrown into the system, which is making it worth less and less. And it's almost like throwing wood in a fire. It continues to feed the fire of inflation. And it gets worse and worse until it starts to get so bad that now it's almost out of control. And the other thing I would like to add on that, because some people understand this and some may not, is that the government has no money. As I stated before, the government does not provide a good or a service, so they have no way to generate revenue. So the only way that the government generates revenue is by taxing the people. So whenever they come up with all these grand ideas of how, like I said, you want to cancel student loan debt, free housing, free education, free health care, it comes in the form of a tax to the American workers. So every time that the government comes up with a grand plan, it costs us money. So my thing of it is, I wish they stop experimenting and stop coming up with all these ideas of all these things that they want to try to pay for using our money. It's just like having a credit card, a gold card, and giving it to a friend, and they go on a shopping spree with your money and just spending your money lavishly on all type of things. They don't care what it costs. It's not their money. And it's the same example when we're dealing with the government. It's not their money. So they'll throw it around everywhere like they have been doing and what they continue to do. And it's hurting the average American, especially the middle income workers, people that work for a living. A lot of people right now are living from paycheck to paycheck, just trying to make ends meet and keep their head above water. But as I stated, the government don't care because it isn't their money. So they continue to come up with ideas for different things that they want to involve themselves in. And mind you, all of these were private, part of the private economy, which, as I stated from the very beginning, does not need government involvement, if you would. Do not need government involvement or government influence, because all the government is doing is taking the money that would normally be generated in the economy. The market will set the price on anything. If it's too high, I'm not going to pay for it. So you got to bring the price down to where it's reasonable, then I'll buy it. So the law of supply and demand does work, and it works effectively. Now, what the government is doing, they want to come in and take over those areas that was meant to be uh, ran by the private sector, by the private economy, getting into housing, getting into healthcare. Healthcare, for the longest time, and in a lot of places is still the case, is provided through an employer. The employer provides healthcare to their employees as long as they're employed with them. There are other situations such as Medicare, Medicaid for older Americans that provide for their health care. Now, those are government programs, but they're acceptable government programs because once you leave a job, then a lot of times you lose your health care as well. So it's an issue that needs to be dealt with. How can we take care of our people, but on a limited basis, do we want the government involved with it? Because a lot of time when they come in, government programs come in, there's a lot of waste. The service is subpar, and the waiting times for getting into appointments are ridiculous. I can remember just a few years ago with the Veterans Administration that they had to fire the head of the head VA because you had veterans waiting 4 months, 5 months, 6 months to get in for a medical situation that they're having, and people were dying while they were waiting to get in to see a doctor. And under the previous president, under Trump, love him or hate him, facts is facts, that he passed the law saying now, if it was backed up, if they're backed up at the VA and it's taking too long for you to get in and you have a medical emergency, you don't have to go to the VA. You can go to a regular privately ran hospital, because the VA is also a government operation, a government hospital. But now you can go to the private sector and go to the private hospitals where in some cases they can get you in a lot quicker um, than the VA would. Service is arguably better, and it prevents people from dying waiting to see a doctor. And so the private sector does better with those programs, always have and always will, than the government. Any government ran program is filled with waste automatically just by the fact how the government operates and run their programs. It's full of waste and a lot of times also subpar care and service. Now back to the government and how with their lavish spending. Because remember, they have your credit card in their hand, and they don't care. They'll spend it till it's maxed out or it comes back declined. At the end of 2022, after the election in November, you had a changeover in government where now you have the Republican Party won the majority of seats in the November 2022 election, and then we're coming in January, looking back now to January, that they are in control of the House of uh, the United States House of Representatives, which is the house, the government body that controls and sets government spending. And so what did they do after they lost the election? A lot of these guys were leaving anyway. Some had lost their elections, but still they had to sock it to the American people one last time before they left. So on December the 30th, somewhere around the December 31st, the last day of 2022, while they still had a majority, the Democrat majority, they voted on a Friday night when most people are not paying attention. It's a slow news cycle. People are doing whatever they do when they're off work for the week somewhere else. That's all by design too. Passed a $1.7 trillion bill again to continue with their government programs. Now that's money again that you and I are going to have to pay. It's not their money. They don't care. They don't care how difficult it becomes for you either, because if they did, they would stop all that wasteful spending. So in a matter of 3 years, I think the government spending has rose by between 7 and 10 trillion dollars in a matter of 3 years. And we're just going into the third year now. And so all of that continues to feed inflation. And so now the thing is getting out of control. People, employers, as I say, they're always looking down the road. Uh, the average American lives from day to day, week to week. They're looking at months and years and quarters down the road, and they're making their plan based on the projections of where the economy is going, and they work off of that. They make their decisions based off that. So there's been a lot of companies that are starting to lay off their workers because the economy is now slowing down. So inflation has now triggered a recession. And so in a recession, definition of, as we talked before, is 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP, which is gross domestic products and services, which is all the goods and services that are produced in the United States on a yearly and quarterly basis. So when a business sees that the gross domestic product has slowed down, a lot of it due to the fact that you still got that supply chain back up. And so they begin to cut their inventories, they begin to cut their workers, and they started to tighten their belt to ride out this wave of inflation. And so now there's another interesting situation that's taking place. Even though when this president came to office, inflation was like 1.8%. Now inflation has went up to like 8%. So that's a huge jump from 1.7 to 8%. And percentages for a lot of people, they may or may not understand it. In that fact, they understand it in dollars. And we use the example again, if you're trying to save your money and you got $100 in the bank and it's been sitting there, at one point it was worth $98, $99 at a 1.7% inflation rate. Now it's jumped up to 8%. Now that $100, which you've done nothing to it, it's been sitting there the whole time. And that's what inflation does. Inflation is a hidden tax. Inflation is a thief. It'll steal your money right from under your nose. It's sitting in the bank where you think I still got $100, and you do. But when you take that $100 out to do anything with it, buy grocery, buy food, buy gas, it buys less because the goods are higher and the money is cheaper. So it's robbing the value of your money even as it sits in your bank account. And so the economy has still been fairly strong. And so you've got high inflation, but now you still got steady employment. So long as people are working and making money, they're continuing to spend. Um, people have items, people have needs, and they keep trying to service those needs. But the more now that they buy, the more it fuels inflation. So it keeps going up higher and higher. So now here comes the Federal Reserve Board, which is not a part of the federal government. They are a part of the banking industry. And so they come in and now they want to increase the interest rates. The interest rates is the cost of money that you may borrow. The interest rates that they raise also increases the value, the net worth or the value of a product that you're trying to buy. Now, mind you, the money is not higher, but the good that you're trying to buy has come more expensive. So they raise it by 1%, a quarter percent, anywhere from a quarter percent to a full 1%. And they've been doing it in increments. A lot of people say just go ahead and raise the rate 1%, 2%, and get it over with. And what the purpose of raising that interest rate is to make these items so high that it will stop people who do have income from spending. The whole purpose behind raising the interest rate is to slow the purchasing and the spending power of the American person. So they want you to stop buying, and the fact that you stop buying, they're hoping at that point it begins to bring inflation down and they can get control of it, is what's supposed to happen. But that's not happening. The interest rate is continual, so the goods are more expensive, the money is left worse, that's worth less, and so consequently, once again, the recession goes on. Now they're predicting in 2023 that it's going to be worse. It's going to hit the wall, and it's really going to become very difficult for the average American, which I am a part of as well. Is going to have trouble making ends meet. You have to make decisions on, do I pay my electric, gas bill, water bill, or do I buy food? Or can I buy medication, or do I put off the car payment? Tough decisions are going to have to be made. And as I said before, we're going to have to tighten our belt as well, because no one can really see or know when this thing is going to come to an end. And God forbid that all this stuff is going on and you get laid off or you lose your job. It makes it extremely difficult. And so just another thing to me that shows just how difficult things are getting. And I stated this before, that I may go to a given store who will remain nameless, and I've been there within the last 2 weeks, probably about 6 times, and 4 out of those 6 times they're closed in the middle of the day. I went to a certain restaurant, popular chicken restaurant. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. In the middle of the day, and for the very first time in my experience, this past week, they were closed. And so that again is showing me just how deep and how difficult this recession is going to be. And part of it is they're finding it hard to find people to work. And this was a result of paying people to stay at home. Then once the free money stopped coming in, people got lazy and did not want to go back to work. So now we got a labor shortage, which is still feeding the recession and the inflation, because now people are really struggling because they don't have income. Businesses can't operate their businesses the way they used to. So there's a whole group of factors that are coming into play that really makes things hard for the average individual. Again, out in California, they want San Francisco was one that comes to mind, and Los Angeles may be another, that they want to do a thing called guaranteed income. They want to guarantee a person an income, whether you're working or not. It doesn't even matter. So once again, you're paying people not to work, not to produce, which is going to affect the economy. It's going to affect the labor pool, creating labor shortages, which is going to disrupt businesses. And all of this is being done because the government wants to be in control of that. They got the saying, the camel's nose under the tent. It seems like it's an innocent thing at first when you put the camel put his nose under a tent. And slowly but surely, as time goes on, as more and more his head begins to creep in, his neck begins to creep in. Then the next thing you know, the whole body of the camel is in the tent. And not only that, he summons some of his other camel friends. Now the tent is full of camels running all around, as the man said before, pooping on the floor and all the rest. It's become an uncontrollable, unsustainable situation. And the camel in the tent is the government. And so they're creating it because they want to take over that, just like they took over healthcare. They take over, which is 20% of our economy. They want to control that by putting in place government ran healthcare, which I oppose. The government don't need to be in there. I already mentioned before, you got Medicare and Medicaid. You're already involved for the aging population. And I understand that and I agree with that because I'm also entered into that area as well. But you don't need to take over the healthcare industry, just like the government came in um, some 10 years ago and took over the student loan situation, which used to be ran by banks. It was in a private bank. So if a parent was trying to send a child to college, they would go to the bank, they would negotiate with the bank, fill out a promissory note to receive funds to send their kids to college. So it's between the banks and the individual, which again is the private economy. 10 years ago, the government came in and took over the student loan situation. It's ran by the government. And as soon as they got a hold to it, it is completely out of hand, out of control. The student loan debt now is over $1 trillion. It's a major part of our economy that cannot be sustained, and I don't see no way of paying it either. And so there needs to be something put in place. I speak of the thing like John F. Kennedy did years ago when I was a kid when Kennedy became president. But he asked not what uh, your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country? And that's the way we need to be thinking. While we're sitting around waiting on handouts and giveaways for something to give up, we ought to be looking at ways we can do something to make the country a better place for all of us. And so one of the things he did, he came up with the program escapes me now. It was the core, I believe it was, where you can go and volunteer for your country, uh, volunteer your time and your service for paying off a debt. At least that's what I'm speaking of now. So anyone that has student loan debt, there ought to be ways that people can volunteer, do things in the economy and in the country to, especially now with people having labor shortages as they are, and you do put that in lieu of paying the student loan debt. So you're not just letting it go or wiping it off the books or charging the hardworking Americans to pay for student loan debts because we're the one paying for it. The government's not paying for anything. They're just using our money to do it. And the problem that I have with that, even though I was able to go to community college, get a degree, there's other families that could not afford to send their kids to college, but yet I'm paying for someone else's student loan debt. And that is totally unfair to that individual. And so there has to be a better method, better model in order to get that student loan debt under control. And I say it ought to be in the form of volunteering. no matter what it is, cleaning up your community, volunteer to do an apprenticeship with a company or a business, especially you already got a degree. Some of you already have your degrees already, that you volunteer a year or two, depending on how much money that you owe. Volunteer is like an apprenticeship program that you come in and they can still pay you a stipend, because I realize you still have to live too. That they pay you a stipend and you come in and you work off your student loan debt, and it helps the economy, it helps the country, and it also helps you, instead of just taxing and working individuals like myself to pay off someone else's student loan debt. And so that's what happened with student loan. It got out of control when the government came and took over it. And it's the same thing with everything that the government touches. It's out of control. As I said before, it has waste built into the system. That's the problem with dealing with the government and why people don't want to touch it. Waste is built into the system that as soon as they come in, you can count on anywhere from 5% or 10% of their budget to be waste, because they're not good managers when it comes to other people's resources. And so that's why they don't belong in the student loan business. They don't belong in the healthcare industry. They don't belong in building houses. They don't belong in any of those areas, because the waste that comes with it is enormous. And so I'd say that, again, to say that this country is out, and as long as it's existed, has worked it well under the supply and demand system, and we need to continue that system as long as we can. We have the best economy in the world. The thing we need to do is start bringing our overseas businesses that are over in China and other places, but primarily in China, to come back to America and continue to do your manufacturing from these shores in your country. One thing that was highlighted during the COVID crisis of China, that was highlighted, is that um, we found out then that all of our medicines and all the other things, masks and all the other equipment that we would need to deal with the virus, is now created in China that used to be created in America. And that's just not wise. Why our manufacturing sites went overseas like that. But I understand it. It was because of the high taxation, because the going thing now and the popular thing now is tax the rich, pay your fair share. Those are the buzzwords that they are using. But my thing is, and I'm not a wealthy person, um, but I don't agree with just taxing people just because they have money. They put in the hard work, they made the major investments, they've done the researches, just like they did with the vaccine, all the money and the research and everything that goes into it. So if they turn a profit from that, they deserve, yes, to pay their fair share, but not any more than that. But they deserve to keep the profits, because they've taken all the risk, done all the research, and they should be able to hold on to whatever resources or whatever wealth they have accumulated as a result of it. That's a part of the economic system as well. So just because you see a person, they have a lot of money, saying, well, they ought to pay more because they have more. And in most cases, when you're talking about rich individuals, they do pay more. There's some that use the tax loops and tax breaks while they're complaining. If you want to do something, get rid of the loopholes, cut the tax bracket, and they'll automatically have to pay more. But just to turn around and try to take their resources away from them because they've accumulated them is not right and it's not fair. And I don't care who we're talking about or how much money they have. And that's why most companies are going off seas. That's why they're going to China, because they're trying to go somewhere that they can do business and keep the maximum amount of money they paid for the least amount of taxation. And if I was in this situation, I would do the exact same thing. So these people have a right to hold on to the revenues that they have accumulated. And again, that's why that they're leaving and going overseas, because they're being unfairly taxed, uh, for the government to get more money to create more government waste, and there's no end to it. And so, and another thing to keep in mind too, and you're talking about corporations, some business, and most of those businesses that are in China are giant corporations. And so they don't pay taxes anyway. If the government comes in and taxes a rich corporation, all they're going to do is pass, because corporations don't pay taxes. So saying that to say that if you try to charge a corporation and you raise their tax rate by like 2% to get more revenue from those businesses, as I said, for the government to have to waste the money in the first place, then all they're going to do is increase the price of their products. If it's a car or an iPhone or an Apple phone or a computer or a TV or anything else, and you're taxing it by 2%, they're just going to take that 2% and pass it on to the item that they're selling. And guess who ends up paying it in the end? We do, once again. So it's all a shell game. It's a con when you say you're taxing the rich, because all they're going to do is pass the overhead and the cost along to the individuals. So either way it goes, the working man is the one getting stuck at the end of the day with the check, because someone who is wealthy have the ability to move their assets and move their business offshore from America where they can't be touched. So that's all I wanted to say in regard to the tough times are still coming ahead of us, but we need to be really mindful, paying attention to what's going on, realizing that we're still on the verge of a recession. All the indicators are pointing that way, and to be more prepared and be more rational and be more disciplined with the resources that you have. The Lord calls us to be good stewards. Ruler over little becomes rulers of much. Once you prove you can handle a little amount, then I'll give you a little more. If you once you've shown that you can deal with that, I'll give you more. Which is the story of the talents: the 1 talent, the 2 talents, the 5 talents, the 10 talents. The more talent you can manage as a good steward, then the more that the Lord will add to your plate. And it's a principle, and it doesn't matter if you believe in the Lord or not. I do. But the fact is, it's a spiritual principle. It works whether you believe or you don't believe, because it's a principle that's been put into place, and it'll work for anyone that practices it and discipline enough to uh, manage your resources well. So again, that's all that we have for now. It's good to see. Good to be back on the air sharing, but the thing I want to leave you with is tough times are still ahead. And the expression goes, tough times don't last always, tough people do. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you at the next podcast. God bless.